My sister stood up at my father's memorial dinner, wearing my dead mother's necklace, and announced that my husband and I were finally getting divorced. The problem was, I hadn't told anyone yet. And the reason she knew was because she was the woman he had been cheating with. And the entire room went silent. My aunt dropped her fork. My cousin looked at me like she had just watched someone get slapped. And my husband, Daniel, went pale so fast I honestly thought he was going to pass out. But the worst part was not that my sister Madison said it. The worst part was that she smiled when she said it. That tiny smile she had always used when she knew she had taken something from me and wanted me to notice. Then she touched the gold necklace around her throat. My mother's necklace. The one my dad promised me before he died. And she said, "I just think it's time everyone stops pretending Olivia's marriage is perfect." That was the moment I realized this was not grief. This was a performance, and I was the target. My name is Olivia. I'm 34 now, but at the time this happened, I was 32, exhausted, grieving, and honestly barely holding my life together. My dad had died 3 weeks earlier from a sudden heart attack. No warning, no long illness, no emotional goodbye scene. He was there on a Tuesday morning, complaining about the price of eggs over the phone, and by Tuesday night, my brother-in-law was calling me from the hospital parking lot saying, "Liv, you need to come now." By the time I got there, he was gone. My mom had died when I was 19, so losing my dad felt like losing the last real parent I had. And Madison knew that. Madison was my older sister by 3 years. Growing up, she was the beautiful one, the dramatic one, the one my parents said was sensitive, which basically meant she could ruin a holiday and everyone else had to apologize for upsetting her. I was the responsible one. That sounds like a compliment until you realize it means everyone expects you to absorb damage quietly. If Madison cried, people asked who hurt her. If I cried, people asked why I was making things harder. When my mom died, I handled paperwork. Madison handled attention. She posted black and white photos, wrote long emotional captions, and told people she was basically an orphan, while I was at the bank closing accounts and helping my dad remember how to buy groceries. My dad loved us both, but he saw Madison clearly in a way my mother never did. He used to say, "Your sister doesn't know how to be happy unless someone else is losing." I thought that was harsh. Now I think it was the kindest warning he ever gave me. My husband Daniel came into my life when I was 27. He was charming in a quiet way. Not flashy, not loud. He worked in commercial insurance, wore button-down shirts even on weekends, and had the kind of calm voice that made you feel stupid for panicking. When we met, I was working as an office manager at a dental practice. I wasn't rich, but I was stable. I paid my bills. I had my own apartment. I took care of my dad. I thought I knew how to spot selfish people because I had grown up with Madison. I didn't realize some selfish people are better at hiding it. Daniel and Madison got along immediately. Too immediately, honestly. At first, I thought it was nice. Madison was hard to impress, and Daniel seemed proud that my family liked him. She would tease him at dinners, touch his arm when she laughed, call him Danny, which he claimed to hate. But he never corrected her. One Thanksgiving, Madison spilled wine on my sweater and said, "Oh my God, Liv, I'm so sorry. I'm such a disaster." Then she turned to Daniel and said, "You married the patient sister. Lucky you." Daniel laughed. I remember that laugh. Because it was not the kind of laugh you give when something is funny. It was the kind of laugh you give when you're enjoying being included in someone else's cruelty. But I ignored it. Because that's what I had been trained to do. After my dad died, things got strange almost immediately. The first weird thing was Madison becoming obsessed with the will. Not emotional things. Not funeral plans. Not what him's dad would have wanted. Money. She kept texting me things like, "Did dad ever mention accounts to you? Do you know where he kept his safe deposit box key? Did he update the will after Grandma died?" At first, I answered normally because I was too numb to question it. Then, 2 days after the funeral, she showed up at Dad's house with Starbucks, red ice, and a tote bag. I was in his kitchen, sorting through medication bottles. She walked in, looked around, and said, "This house feels so empty without him." I said, "Yeah." She took one sip of coffee and then said, "So, where are the important documents?" I looked at her. She looked back like I was being dramatic. "What?" she said. "We have to deal with it eventually." "Eventually doesn't have to mean today," she sighed. "Olivia, some of us don't have the luxury of pretending responsibilities disappear." That almost made me laugh. Madison had not paid one bill for my father in 13 years. I had taken him to doctor appointments. I had helped him after knee surgery. I had been the one he called when the water heater broke. Madison visited when she needed money or when she wanted photos of herself being a good daughter. But there she was, accusing me of avoiding responsibility. Then she walked past me into Dad's office. I followed her. She was already opening drawers. I said, "Madison, stop," she snapped. "Don't talk to me like I'm stealing." And I remember thinking, why would she use that word? I had not said stealing. She had. That was the first crack. The second crack came from Daniel. The week after Dad died, Daniel suddenly started working late every night. He said his department was being audited. He said his boss was breathing down his neck. He said he didn't want to bring his stress home while I was grieving. That sounded considerate until I realized he was barely home at all. When he was home, he guarded his phone like it had state secrets in it, face down on the table, always in his pocket, password changed, notifications hidden. One night, around 11:40, I woke up and he was not in bed. I found him downstairs in the laundry room whispering, not talking, whispering. When he saw me, he jumped so hard he knocked the detergent bottle off the shelf. I said, "Who are you talking to?" He ended the call and said, "Work." "At midnight?" "It's not midnight. It's 11:40. "Okay, so not midnight." That was Daniel's thing. If he could make you argue about a tiny detail, he could avoid the real question. I said, "Why are you whispering in the laundry room?" He rubbed his face and said, "Because you've been sleeping terribly and I didn't want to wake you." It was almost believable. Almost. Then his phone buzzed. He looked down, and for 1 second, his face changed. Not fear exactly, more like irritation that reality had interrupted his lie. I asked, "Who is it?" He said, "My boss." I said, "Show me." He stared at me. Then he laughed like I was being ridiculous. "Olivia, I'm not doing this." That was the first time I felt scared in my own marriage. Not scared he would hurt me physically. Scared that the person I trusted most had built a room in his life where I was not allowed, and someone else had the key. The third crack came at the attorney's office. My dad's lawyer, Mr. Callahan, was an older man with silver hair, reading glasses, and the calmest voice I had ever heard. Madison showed up 20 minutes late wearing oversized sunglasses indoors. Daniel came with me, which I thought was supportive at the time. Looking back, he insisted on coming. Mr. Callahan opened the will and explained that my dad had left the house to me, not because he loved Madison less, but because I had been living 10 minutes away for years, maintaining the house, helping with expenses, and because Dad wanted me to have a stable place if anything happened. Madison got half of his retirement account. I got the other half. But the house was mine. Madison removed her sunglasses slowly. Then she laughed. Not loudly, just one sharp little laugh. "Of course." Mr. Callahan paused. "Is there a concern?" Madison looked at me and said, "No, it's just very on brand." I said, "What does that mean?" "It means you always end up with everything because you make yourself look helpless." I was so stunned I couldn't respond. She kept going. "You hovered around Dad for years, making sure he depended on you, and now here we are." I said, "I took care of him." "You controlled him." Daniel put a hand on my knee under the table. At the time, I thought he was calming me down. Now I know he was warning me not to speak. Mr. Callahan cleared his throat and continued. Then he mentioned my mother's necklace. Dad had written a separate personal letter. The necklace was specifically left to me. Madison's face changed again. This time, she could not hide it. "That necklace was Mom's," she said. Mr. Callahan nodded. "Yes, and your father's letter says he wanted Olivia to have it because your mother wore it the night Olivia was born." Madison looked at me like I had stolen my own birth. After the meeting, she followed me into the parking lot. Daniel went to take a call. Madison walked right up to me and said, "You're not keeping that house." I said, "I'm not doing this with you." She stepped closer. "You think Dad chose you because you're special? He chose you because you made him feel guilty." I said, "Madison, please, he just died." "And you're already cashing in?" And that broke something in me. I said, "You mean like when you asked him for $10,000 last year and told him you'd pay it back?" Her mouth tightened. That was different. "How?" "I needed it." "For what?" She looked away, and that was another thing I did not understand until later. Madison was broke. Not struggling. Broke. Credit cards maxed. A car payment behind. A lifestyle she could not afford, and a husband, Brent, who had finally stopped covering it. But I did not know how bad it was yet. 2 weeks later, we planned a memorial dinner for Dad at a small Italian restaurant he loved. It was supposed to be simple. Family only. No speeches unless people wanted to share memories. I almost didn't go because I was emotionally empty. Daniel convinced me. He said, "You'll regret it if you don't." Madison acted weird the entire night. Too dressed up. Too cheerful. Too focused on who was watching her. And then I saw the necklace. My mother's necklace. Gold chain. Small oval pendant. Tiny emerald in the center. I knew it instantly because I had touched it 100 times in my mom's jewelry box when I was little. I walked over to Madison before dinner was served and said quietly, "Why are you wearing that?" She touched it and smiled. "Oh, Dad gave it to me years ago. My stomach dropped. No, he didn't. She blinked innocently. Excuse me? Dad's lawyer said it was left to me. Madison tilted her head. Then I guess Dad forgot he already gave it away, I said. Take it off. Her eyes went glossy immediately. Not real tears, performance tears. Are you seriously attacking me over jewelry at Dad's memorial? People started looking. Daniel appeared beside me and whispered, Olivia, not here. I stared at him. Did you know she had it? He looked at Madison. That split second was enough. My entire body went cold. You knew, I said. Daniel said, I didn't know it was that big of a deal. My cousin Rachel stood up from the table and asked, What's going on? Madison wiped under her eye, even though no tear had fallen. Then she stood. And that's when she announced my divorce. I just think it's time everyone stops pretending Olivia's marriage is perfect. I felt the room tilt. Someone said, Madison, but she kept going. She's been miserable for months. Daniel is miserable. Everyone knows it. I looked at Daniel. He would not meet my eyes. Then Madison said, Maybe if Olivia didn't treat every person in her life like property, people wouldn't have to hide things from her. Hide things. That phrase hit me so hard I forgot how to breathe. I looked at Daniel and said, What did you tell her? He said nothing, so I turned back to Madison. What did he tell you? Madison smiled again. And I knew, before anyone said it, before I had proof, before I saw a single message. I knew my sister and my husband had betrayed me in a way my brain did not want to accept. I left the restaurant without eating. Daniel followed me into the parking lot. He grabbed my arm and said, You need to calm down. I pulled away. Do not touch me. He looked around like he was embarrassed someone might see. That made me angrier. Not my pain, not his betrayal. His embarrassment. I said, Are you sleeping with her? His face twisted. What? Are you sleeping with my sister? That's insane. Then answer, he said. You're grieving and she got under your skin. I said, Answer me. He snapped, No. But he said it too late. There is a kind of lie that arrives after the truth has already shown its face. That was one of them. I drove home alone. Daniel did not come home until almost 3 a.m. I was sitting at the kitchen table with every light on. He walked in, loosened his tie and said, We need to talk when you're rational. I said, Unlock your phone. He laughed softly. Absolutely not. Then leave. That surprised him. Olivia, leave. This is my house too. I looked at him and said, Actually no, it isn't. His face hardened. For the first time, I saw something ugly underneath the calm. He said, You think because your dad left you a house, you can talk to me like that? I said, I think because you won't show me your phone after my sister announced my divorce, you can sleep somewhere else. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he said something I will never forget. You have no idea how hard you are to love. It was so calculated, so perfectly aimed. He knew exactly where to stab. And the worst part is, for about 3 seconds, it worked. I wondered if he was right. Then his phone buzzed. He looked down, and I saw the name before he turned it away. Maddie, not Madison. Maddie. I said, Get out. He left. And the second the door closed, I broke. I cried so hard I could barely breathe. Not just because of the cheating. Because my father was dead. My mother was gone. My sister hated me. My husband had been lying to my face. And somehow, I was still wondering if I had done something to deserve it. Be honest. What would you have done in my position? Because what I did next was not pretty. The next morning, Daniel texted me. Don't make this worse than it is. Then Madison texted. I'm sorry last night got emotional, but you embarrassed yourself. I stared at that message for a full minute. Then another came in. You need therapy, Liv. This obsession with controlling everyone is not healthy. That word, controlling. They were using the same language. That was not a coincidence. So I stopped replying. For the first time in my life, I did not defend myself. I did not explain. I did not beg. I started collecting. I checked our phone records. Daniel had called Madison 46 times in the previous 2 months. Most calls were late at night. Some lasted over an hour. I checked our bank statements. There were hotel charges in 2 nearby towns. Restaurants I had never been to. A jewelry store charged for $740. I remembered Madison wearing new diamond earrings at Dad's funeral. I checked Daniel's laptop. He had forgotten that years earlier, he synced his messages to the computer. At first, I found nothing. Then I searched Liv. Hundreds of messages came up. Not just cheating, mocking, Madison. She still thinks Dad left her the house because she earned it. Daniel. She needs something to feel important. Madison, you should have seen her face when I wore the necklace. Daniel, that was risky. But Madison, worth it. I had to stand up and walk away from the laptop. My hands were shaking so hard I thought I might throw up. Then I went back. Because pain becomes different when it turns into evidence. I kept reading. They had been sleeping together for at least 5 months. It started before my dad had died, maybe longer. Daniel complained about me constantly. He told Madison I was cold, too serious, too attached to my father, too careful with money. Madison fed him exactly what he wanted to hear. She told him he deserved someone fun, someone who made him feel wanted, someone who did not act like life was one big responsibility. Then I found the financial part. Madison had borrowed money from Daniel, not once, multiple times. $2,000 here, $5,000 there, a payment toward her car, a credit card bill, and then a message that made everything click. Madison, once the house is sold, she'll have enough to buy you out and we can all stop pretending. Daniel, she won't sell unless she has to. Madison, then make her have to. I stared at those 4 words. Make her have to. That was when I realized that cheating was not the only betrayal. They were planning to pressure me out of my father's house. Daniel knew if we divorced, he might try to claim some part of the value, or at least scare me into a settlement. Madison wanted cash. Daniel wanted out without looking like the villain. And both of them thought grief would make me weak. But they had forgotten something. My dad had taught me paperwork. I called Mr. Callahan first. Then I called a divorce attorney named Sandra Bell, who had the kind of voice that made you sit up straighter. I sent her screenshots, bank records, phone logs, messages. By the time she called me back, she said, "Olivia, do not confront him again without a plan." I asked, "Can he take the house?" She said, "Based on what you've sent me, probably not. It was inherited separately, and you haven't commingled it. But he may try to scare you." Then she paused. "And your sister may have created a separate legal issue with the necklace." The necklace? I had almost forgotten about it in the middle of everything else. Sandra told me to check whether there were photos or appraisals. I went to Dad's house and searched his filing cabinet. In a folder labeled Personal Property, I found an appraisal from 1998. The necklace was worth more than I thought. Not life-changing money, but enough to matter legally. Then I found my dad's handwritten note. "Olivia gets your mother's necklace. She used to hold it when she missed her. Madison gets the pearl earrings." I sat on the floor of my dad's office holding that note against my chest. And for the first time since he died, I felt him with me. Not in a ghostly way, in a father way, like he had known Madison would try something, like he had left me one last piece of protection. The next day, Madison posted a photo on Instagram wearing the necklace. Caption, "Wearing mom close to my heart today. Some bonds can be stolen." I stared at it. Some bonds can be stolen. She had stolen the necklace. She had stolen my husband. She was trying to steal my house. And she was posting like she was the victim. I screenshotted it. Then I did nothing publicly. That was hard. So hard. Every part of me wanted to comment. To expose her. To call her what she was. But Sandra told me, people like this want you emotional. Don't give them emotion. Give them consequences. So I waited. Daniel came home 2 days later. He looked exhausted, which annoyed me because betrayal apparently wears people out. He had a duffel bag. He said, "Can we talk?" I said, "You can talk." He sat across from me at the kitchen table. The same table where my dad had once eaten birthday cake with us. Daniel sighed. "I made mistakes." I almost smiled. Mistakes, like he had forgotten milk. "I felt lonely," he said. I said nothing. "You were so focused on your dad. Then after he died, you shut me out completely." Should I said, "You were sleeping with my sister before he died?" His eyes flicked. There it was, the first sign he knew I knew. He said, "She told you?" "No." "Then how?" He stopped. I said, "Keep going." He rubbed his forehead. "It wasn't like you think." I said, "Was it accidental?" He looked offended. "What?" "Did you trip and fall into my sister for 5 months?" His jaw tightened. "That's not fair." I laughed once. It came out colder than I expected. "You and Madison were planning to force me to sell my father's house." He went still. "That's not true." I opened my laptop and turned it toward him. The message was on the screen. "Make her have to." Daniel stared at it. For once, he had no calm explanation. No therapy language. No soft voice. Just silence. Then he said, "You went through my private messages?" And that was when I understood gaslighting in its purest form. Not confusion. Not misunderstanding. A person standing in front of proof of their betrayal and trying to put you on trial for finding it. I said, "Pack the rest of your things." He said, "Olivia, listen to me." "No." "You don't want a war." I looked him dead in the eyes. You should have thought about that before you started one with my sister. He left furious. Within an hour, Madison called me 16 times. I did not answer. Then she texted, "You are destroying everyone because your ego is bruised." Then, "Daniel is a good man. You neglected him." Then, "Dad would be ashamed of how greedy you're being." That one almost got me. Almost. Then I remembered my dad's note. Madison did not get to use him as a weapon anymore. 2 days later, her husband Brent called me. I had never been close to Brent. He was quiet, practical, and always looked slightly tired. He said, "Olivia, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." I knew from his voice that he already knew some of it. I said, "Okay," he said. "Is Madison having an affair with Daniel?" I closed my eyes. "Yes." There was a long silence. Then he exhaled like someone had punched him. "How long?" "At least 5 months," he whispered. "Jesus," I said. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't be. I think I knew. I just didn't want to know." Then he asked, "Do you have proof?" I sent him enough. Not everything. Just enough. He called me back 20 minutes later, and his voice was different. Not broken. Cold. He said, "She told me you were unstable." "She said you had become obsessed with Daniel and were accusing everyone." I said, "Of course she did," he said. "She also told me your dad promised her the house." I actually laughed. She said what? She said your dad changed his mind, but you manipulated the lawyer. That was Madison's pattern. If reality did not favor her, she invented a version where she was robbed. Brendan told me something I did not know. Madison had drained their joint savings, almost $18,000. She said it was for debt consolidation. But Brent had found payments to a hotel, expensive clothes, and a storage unit. A storage unit? That detail stuck with me. I asked, "What storage unit?" He said, "I don't know. I just found the charge." That night, I barely slept. A storage unit meant she was hiding something. The next morning, Brent sent me a photo of the receipt. The storage facility was 10 minutes from my dad's house. I drove there without a plan, which Sandra later scolded me for. I told the front desk woman my sister might be storing stolen family property there. The woman obviously could not give me access, but when I showed her a photo of Madison wearing the necklace, she said, "I can't confirm anything." Then she paused. "But if you have legal documentation, bring it." I knew what that meant, so I called Sandra. Sandra contacted Mr. Callahan. Mr. Callahan contacted the estate court. And 2 days later, everything got worse before it got better. Madison filed a formal challenge to the will. She claimed my dad was not mentally competent when he signed it. She claimed I isolated him. She claimed I pressured him. She claimed the house should be split equally. She also claimed the necklace had been gifted to her verbally. It was all lies. But lies written in legal language become expensive. The stress hit me physically. I stopped eating normally. I woke up every morning with my heart racing. At work, I forgot simple things. One afternoon, my boss, Karen, pulled me into her office and said, "Olivia, I don't need details, but whatever is happening, you are not okay." And I burst into tears. I hated crying at work, but Karen just handed me tissues and said, "Take the afternoon." That was when I realized the fallout was not staying in the family. It was bleeding into everything. My marriage, my job, my sleep, my sense of reality. Meanwhile, Madison was posting online like she was starring in a grief documentary. Quotes about betrayal. Photos of candles. A story that said, "Sometimes the people who inherit things are not the people who deserve them." My Aunt Linda commented with a heart. That hurt more than I expected, because some people believed her, or maybe they just wanted the simpler story. Madison, the emotional daughter, robbed by cold Olivia. It was easier than admitting she was cruel. Then came the biggest twist. Mr. Callahan called me on a Friday morning and said, "Olivia, we found something." His assistant had been organizing old digital files from my dad. Apparently, my dad had sent himself scanned copies of documents and voice memos after a family fight 2 years earlier. I did not even know he knew how to do that. One file was labeled Madison Loan Discussion. It was an audio recording. Mr. Callahan said, "Your father recorded this in his own home. State law allows it under these circumstances, but your attorney will handle admissibility." He sent it to Sandra first. Sandra called me and said, "Sit down before you listen." So I sat, and I listened to my dead father's voice. At first it broke me, then it saved me. In the recording, Madison was crying. She said, "Dad, I swear I'll pay it back." My dad said, "Maddie, you said that the last 3 times. She said, "If you don't help me, Brent is going to leave." Dad said, "Then you need to tell Brent the truth." Madison snapped, "You always take Olivia's side." Dad sounded tired. "This has nothing to do with Olivia. Yes, it does. She gets everything. She gets your time, your trust, your sympathy. Then my dad said something that made me cover my mouth. Olivia shows up, Madison. That's the difference. There was silence. Then Madison said, voice low and ugly, when you die, she's going to act like she earned all of it. My dad said, I already updated my will. Madison said, then change it. No. Then don't expect me to play nice. My dad was quiet for a moment. Then he said, is that a threat? Madison said, it's a promise. The recording ended. I sat there in the silence afterward, shaking. Not because Madison's behavior surprised me, because my dad had known. He had been dealing with her threats while I thought he was just being tired and quiet. I wished so badly he had told me, but maybe he knew I would try to fix it. And he did not want me carrying one more thing. That recording changed everything. Sandra used it to respond to the will challenge. Brent used the financial records in his separation from Madison. Daniel's attorney suddenly became much more polite. But Madison did not stop. People like her never stop when they are losing. They escalate. She showed up at my house on a Sunday morning. I saw her through the window before she rang the bell. She looked awful. No makeup, hair messy, eyes red. For one stupid second, I felt bad for her. Then I remembered the necklace. I opened the door but kept the chain lock on. She looked at the chain and laughed bitterly. Really? I said. What do you want? She said, you need to call off your lawyer. No. Olivia, I'm going to lose everything, I said. You should have thought about that before you tried to take everything. She leaned closer. You think you're so innocent? I said nothing. You were always Dad's favorite. You loved it. You acted humble, but you loved being the good daughter. That hit a nerve because part of me had spent years afraid that was true. That maybe I did perform goodness. Maybe being needed had become my identity. But then Madison said the thing that I erased any sympathy I had left. Daniel came to me because he needed someone who didn't smell like grief and obligation. I just stared at her. She smiled slightly. There she was again, the real Madison. She wanted me wounded. Even then. Even with her life collapsing, she needed one more cut. I said, you have 30 seconds to leave before I call the police. Her face changed. You wouldn't. I would. She stepped back. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out the necklace. My mother's necklace. For a second, I thought she was returning it. Instead, she held it over the concrete porch and dropped it. The pendant cracked against the step. I screamed, Madison, she said. There. Now, neither of us has Mom. Then she walked away. I don't remember calling Sandra. I just remember sitting on the porch holding the broken necklace in my palm. That was the lowest point. Not Daniel, not the affair, not the will challenge. That, because it was so needlessly cruel. She could not have it, so she wanted it ruined. But Madison forgot something again. I had a doorbell camera. The video was clear. Her face, her words, the necklace, everything. Sandra's exact words were, well, that was stupid of her. As the court hearing happened 6 weeks later, it was not dramatic like TV. No screaming, no judge slamming a gavel while everyone gasped. It was fluorescent lights, wooden benches, lawyers whispering, and people pretending not to stare. Madison came in wearing a navy dress and the face she used for sympathy. Daniel was not there, but his lawyer was. Brent sat on the opposite side of the room from Madison. He looked thinner, tired. But when he saw me, he nodded once. It felt like an apology from the only person in that mess who did not owe me one. Madison's lawyer argued that my father had been influenced. Sandra responded with medical records, financial records, testimony from Mr. Callahan, my dad's note, and then the recording. Watching Madison's face while my father's voice played in that room was something I will never forget. At first, she looked annoyed, then nervous, then furious. When her own voice said, then don't expect me to play nice, she closed her eyes. My Aunt Linda, who had believed her, started crying quietly behind me. Then Sandra introduced the doorbell footage. Madison's lawyer tried to object. It did not work. The room watched my sister drop my mother's necklace onto my porch and say, now neither of us has Mom. No one looked at Madison after that, not even her lawyer. The judge did not call her evil. Judges do not do that. But he did dismiss her challenge. He confirmed the house was mine. He ordered the return of any remaining estate property in her possession. And he made it very clear that further harassment would not help her. It was not cinematic, but it was satisfying. Quietly, legally, completely satisfying. Outside the courthouse, Madison tried one last time. She walked up to me with tears in her eyes. Real ones this time, I think. She said, are you happy now? I looked at her. For most of my life, that question would have trapped me. I would have felt guilty. I would have softened. I would have said, Madison, I didn't want this. But that day, I told the truth. No, I said. I'm not happy. I'm free. She flinched like I had slapped her. Then she looked past me at Brent. Brent, please. He shook his head. I'm done. And that was the moment Madison finally understood. She had not just lost the house. She had lost the audience. Daniel signed the divorce papers 2 months later. He tried to negotiate for money at first. Sandra shut it down fast. When the evidence of the affair and financial planning came up, his tone changed. He sent me one long email that started with, I know I hurt you, but... I deleted it without finishing. Because I had learned that everything before but, in an apology, is usually bait. He moved to a different city 6 months later. A mutual friend told me Madison tried to move in with him after Brent filed for divorce, but Daniel would not let her. That almost made me laugh. They destroyed 2 marriages for a fantasy neither one wanted once it became real. Madison ended up in a small apartment across town. Brent kept the house because it was his before marriage. Her friends slowly disappeared, not because I exposed her online, but because the truth leaked the way truth always does in families, not all at once. Through whispers, screenshots, court documents, people comparing stories, my Aunt Linda called me crying and apologized. She said, I should have known better. I wanted to be gracious, but I was tired. So I said, yes, you should have. There was silence. Then she said, I understand. That was one of the first times I realized forgiveness and access are not the same thing. I could forgive people in my heart someday. That did not mean they got a chair at my table. As for the necklace, I took it to a jeweler. The pendant was damaged, but not beyond repair. The jeweler, an older woman named Elise, listened quietly while I explained what happened. When I finished, she said, some breaks are part of the piece now. We can hide them, or we can make them stronger. As she repaired the pendant with a tiny gold seam around the crack. At first, I hated that the damage was still visible. Then I started to love it, because it looked like what healing actually is. Not untouched, not perfect, still mine. A year after everything happened, I moved into my dad's house permanently. I painted the kitchen a soft blue. I replaced the porch step where Madison dropped the necklace. I planted hydrangeas because my mother loved them. For a long time, the house felt haunted by conflict. Then slowly, it just felt like home. Sometimes I still think about the version of me who sat at that memorial dinner, humiliated and shaking, while my sister wore my mother's necklace and my husband avoided my eyes. I wish I could go back and sit beside her. I would tell her, you are not crazy. I would tell her, you are not hard to love. I would tell her, the people stealing from you will call you selfish when you finally protect yourself. And I would tell her the most important thing. Being the responsible daughter does not mean you have to be the family's emotional trash can forever. Madison still sends messages sometimes, usually around holidays, usually something vague like, I hope you're proud of what you did to this family. I never respond, because the family was not destroyed when I exposed the truth. It was destroyed in every quiet moment they thought I would never find out. And honestly, if I had to do it again, I would expose them sooner. And sometimes karma doesn't arrive screaming. Sometimes it arrives as a locked door, signed papers, and the peace